Hey Josh, this is Ryan with Brand Innovators. I just want to see, can you turn your microphone on for me and your camera on real quick? Just want to make sure that it works.
Yeah. How do I look and sound? I'm so sorry about the internet trouble.
Oh, I know you did not intentionally sabotage the internet in any way, shape, or form. So you are A-okay.
Cool.
Totally fine. So Josh, I can see you. You look awesome. I can hear you. You sound
Good.
amazing. What we do is we're going to push you back to an attendee, and then we're going to bring you up after the introductory remarks. Okay.
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right. We'll see you in a few.
Oh.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BI Livecast series. My name is Andrew Hamp. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the entertainment marketing and editorial consultant here at Brand Innovators. I couldn't be prouder to welcome you all to today's livecast, Marketing to the LGBTQ plus community. Today is really special, and we've got a phenomenal event with an awesome lineup of marketers coming to us virtually from companies including the Trevor Project, Johnson & Johnson, Target 10, and more. Now, some of you may be wondering, why are we talking about LGBTQ plus marketing in November? Wasn't Pride in June? Well, that's precisely the point. At Brand Innovators, we believe it's important to celebrate and engage the LGBTQ plus community and all other underrepresented groups all year round, not just during 1 month. And that's why we couldn't be prouder to have an all-star lineup of marketers joining us today to share how they're highlighting LGBTQ plus storytelling in their work in June and beyond. And in fact, there's recent evidence that even the marketing showcase during Pride Month isn't resonating strongly enough with the general population. In addition to my work with Brand Innovators, I volunteer with a newly founded organization called Do the Work, that's spelled WERQ, and we partner with the research team at Disco, which is spelled Disco with a Q, to poll more than 10,000 people from June 10th to 21st to see how LGBTQ plus inclusive advertising was resonating during its most visible time of the year. The results, unfortunately, were sobering. Nearly 20% of all respondents said they didn't recall seeing any LGBTQ plus advertising during Pride Month, and that's a stat that only got higher with each age group. Less than 13% of 18 to 24-year-olds reported said they didn't see any LGBTQ plus inclusive advertising, less than 14% of 25 to 34, and 19.2% of 35 to 44-year-olds. In fact, overall, 6.3% of LGBTQ plus identifying respondents said they couldn't recall seeing any current ads representing the community, a sign that LGBTQ plus stories haven't fully reached the mainstream. Overall, only 41.8% of respondents said that media and advertising are sufficiently inclusive of LGBTQ plus communities. If you'd like to see more highlights from that research, including which age group said they would like to see less LGBTQ plus advertising and the importance of LGBTQ plus creatives having a voice in the work that's being made, follow at Do the Work. Again, that's WERQ on Twitter and Instagram for more information. Okay, back to today's program. We'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsors for helping make this event possible, as well as thank our audience for taking the time to be here with us today. And remember, we're live. The Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen can be used to ask questions. We'll get to them at the end of each session. And that chat widget is there as well. It's just for our audience and listeners at home. You can use that to connect with attendees and discuss the event in real time. And with that, I'd love to welcome to the stage our first speaker of the day, Josh Weaver. He's the VP of Marketing at the Trevor Project. Please welcome to the stage, Josh.
Hello. How's it going? And apologies, can you hear me okay? Am I coming in loud and clear?
I can, yes. I know you've got some spotty internet today, but we're gonna hope for the best and make it work either way. So no worries.
Perfect.
Josh, thank you so much for joining us today and helping us kick off our fourth Marketing to the LGBTQ plus community. So for those tuning in who might not be familiar with the Trevor Project or need a refresher, tell everyone a little bit about the organization's history and its mission.
Yeah, so the Trevor Project is the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ young people. We've been around since 1998 when we started as a phone line that operated 3 hours a day to support LGBTQ young people in need. And today, 23 years later, we are a 24/7, 365 days out of the year service that serves crisis counselors for LGBTQ young people in need. Any time of the day, it's always free, it's always confidential. More equally important, we do a lot of work on the advocacy side, working both in DC as well as in state legislatures to really drive legislation that affirms LGBTQ young people. And in addition to that, we do research, education, and resource building to really name the problem in terms of the public health crisis around suicide among LGBTQ young people in this country, but also serve resources to support, affirm, and help those young people thrive. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Beautifully said. I myself have a sister who's done a lot of volunteer work as a counselor for the Trevor Project. So the cause is also very important to me. So tell me about, and tell me what drew you to the role, because I know you're a relatively new team member there. You just joined in February in this newly created role of VP of Marketing. So what was your path to the Trevor Project like?
Yeah, so I have always worked in the private sector space. My history is in the publishing industry. I spent 4 years at Vice Media as director of media, and most recently worked at Thrive Global, which is Ariana Huffington's newest venture. But at the end of the day, what piqued my interest so much about the opportunity to come on board at the Trevor Project is to be able to leverage and utilize all the skill set that I've developed throughout my career in private sector marketing about storytelling, driving trust, consideration, authority among audiences, but also, their affinity and loyalty. All those things really go into the pathway of the future for the Trevor Project, because we know that we want to serve more and more LGBTQ young people. We have a goal of serving 1.8 million LGBTQ young people by the end of our 25th fiscal year, which is in 2023. And a big part of doing that is moving those measures of brand interest, brand trust, and brand consideration, so that when a young person is in their time of need, we know that we built the confidence in them to reach out to us and trust us. So all of the expertise that I learned in terms of storytelling and navigating, really deep marketing expertise and data analysis is really crucial to the Trevor Project's ongoing mission and its growth.
Absolutely. Not to get too sobering here, but can you kind of paint a picture for just how much need there is for a service like this? Like, are there any stats that you became aware of as you joined in terms of LGBTQ youth in crisis?
Yeah, and I think it is sobering, but it's important to name it because it starts there. We know that over 40% of LGBTQ young people in the country consider suicide every year, and at least one attempts suicide every 45 seconds. So we know that 23 years since we started, 23 years after the nascent of the Trevor Project, we know that our mission is still crucially important. And that's why we're here today, to not only serve as a crisis support system for those LGBTQ young people in immediate need, but also to do all of the groundwork and everything outside of that to make sure that they're affirmed and thriving. Because we know that even in 2021, we have a long way to go to make sure that every LGBTQ young person here in the United States feels affirmed and can thrive in the communities that they live in. So, yeah.
Well, and the affirmation point is just as crucial as that first call, right? Tell me, maybe walk me through your customer journey. Like, when someone calls for help, what does the relationship with that person look like after that initial interaction?
Yeah, so our services are crisis services. So it's really about de-escalation and making sure that we are really serving that immediate crisis need. Beyond that, it's about resource building, it's about engagement, it's about affirmation. So it's about leveraging social, speaking to LGBTQ young people, providing resources, understanding where we need to double down on certain resources, paying specific regard to the lived experiences under that LGBTQ youth umbrella, delivering impactful messaging that pays specific regard to the Black and Latinx LGBTQ youth experience. So in lockstep with really delivering that crisis support, it's about reaching LGBTQ young people on an always-on perspective and really delivering it and driving the resources and message to affirm them at every touch point we have with them.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the marketing side of your role, because one of the first big remits you underwent when you joined the company was to execute a brand refresh, right, for the Trevor Project logo and kind of brand positioning. Tell me about what that process looked like and what the end result has been so far.
Yeah, so this process far predates me. Over the past 2 years, the organization has done a great deal of research and work in terms of the brand's positioning, but also its look and feel. We really haven't changed the Trevor Project's brand visuals and visual vocabulary since 2011. So we knew it was high time to really recalibrate the brand, optimize it for today's youth cohort, in particular Gen Z, their perspectives on life, really what engages them. How do we take the Trevor Project of 2011 and make it something that's resonant in the TikTok era, for instance? So over 2 years, we did a great deal of research, data validation, speaking to LGBTQ young people themselves through focus groups to determine really what the brand's look and feel should be like. Understanding our internal intrinsics, what the brand means to us and what we want the brand to mean to LGBTQ young people. How do we really reposition the brand's look and feel to capture that? So from testing color palettes to logos to the user experience of the website, making sure that it's as frictionless as possible in terms of allowing an LGBTQ young person to reach us when they need help and they need to reach out to a counselor. So we did years of research to really determine what the most appropriate pathway and future for the brand was. And in September of this year, after all of that research, after all of that development and implementation, we successfully launched the Trevor Project's latest brand refresh, which not only is a move forward in terms of just visual freshness, but also a really validated move forward in terms of making sure we are as resonant as possible among LGBTQ young people. So that goes from, how our compass star, which is a big trademark of ours, how that's incorporated into our logo, really what certain colors connote, and changing what was our trademark orange, which was more of a traditional orange color, to what we call a tangerine, all in the aspects of, having data that says that a move away from that old orange positions us as more aspirational and bold. So a lot of things went into that. But we're really, proud of the product and its evolution and just really eager to see it, get out there and grow.
Absolutely. Well, congrats on getting such a a big refresh out the door so quickly. I mean, yeah, you talked about the seemingly small significance of things like the positioning of the star. Like maybe to tell our audience quickly about that, because when we spoke yesterday, I thought that was so fascinating about how little details like that mean a lot.
Yeah, really fascinating. And they say that everything's in the details, right? Um, our star has been a trademark of ours since 2011. However, it's been positioned in such a way that it was a part of our word mark. It was facing left. So what we did after validation was we removed the star from our actual word mark, right? So the star had its own real estate within our logo lockup, but we actually positioned the star so that it was directed cardinally towards the right, as a means of connoting progression and forward movement. And this is something that, input that we directly got from those young people that we were able to speak to. So it's very impactful, and it really is those details that make all the difference. And we're grateful for the young people that were able to inform us in terms of making those decisions.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the brand refresh was just unveiled in September. Tell me what that looked like from a marketing mix standpoint. What channels or platforms did you rely on to get the word out about this new positioning?
Yeah, so we did a really heavy press push. For us, the brand relaunch was more about repositioning the Trevor Project as an organization, but not repositioning the Trevor Project as an organization. Let me backtrack, but more reintroducing ourselves, our mission, and also telling the narrative of the why. Why are we changing? All of the stuff that we've detailed, it really is the storyline about the changes. Is we really just sought to position ourselves in a place that would really impact positively our mission. And that means, changing with the generational youth cohorts that we serve. But one thing that's important to note is that we're always in market speaking to LGBTQ young people. We have a bevy of always on messaging, whether it's, crisis services TTA messaging, really directing young people to utilize our services, or, broader brand awareness based messaging. And all of that was imbued with the new brand as soon as we launched. So it was really just a continuance of all the messaging that's been out there, but with the new look and feel and that fresh visual vocabulary. But in terms of really pushing out sort of the narrative of the brand refresh, it was about really telling it from an organizational perspective, I'd say.
Excellent. So press was kind of your channel for something as nuanced as the refresh in September. As far as evergreen marketing, tell me a little bit about what your mix looks like there. How do you, what channels do you guys lean on the most?
Yeah, and this is honestly probably the biggest. This, I call it the proverbial pistachio, because it's always a hard thing to crack. And one of the things that we're currently dealing with and grappling with is a lot of the marketplace changes from IDFA to Meta's announcement, which is taking place in January, and the fact that our key demographic is our youth. So that 13 to 17 age range does pose additional difficulties in terms of ways we can reach them and target them based on updates to the marketplace and the ecosystems that we use. But generally speaking, we're everywhere. So we're using all of the key social networks and platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, as well as YouTube, in terms of focusing on LGBTQ young people. But in addition to that, we're equally leveraging Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as some of those other channels as well, to really drive stewardship and to speak to adults that face LGBTQ young people regularly. So we're across the ecosystems. Separately, we're doing SEM and SEO to drive both awareness for our services, but in addition to that, we are, a not-for-profit. So charitable giving is an important factor for us to be able to facilitate and grow what we do. So we do a great deal of SEM in terms of driving charitable giving and community giving. We've done tests across certain sort of direct buys, such as Grindr and Her and other apps that are endemic. But really, the real sort of storyline for us is that we have to pivot. We know that there are a lot of changes to how we can target, and specifically how we can target and reach LGBTQ young people. So as we look forward, we're looking towards more and more contextual alignment. What are the ecosystems where our audiences are endemically consuming, are endemically reading and engaging? And that's where we need to be. So as we grow, it's more and more going to be about contextual alignment, as we have less and less inferential data points at our disposal to really target LGBTQ young people from a data perspective, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. And I would imagine a big part of that too comes from your work with ambassadors and influencers. Can you maybe share who some of those talent partners have been to help spread the word and tell that story with the nuance it deserves?
Yeah. And we have so much gratitude, and we're so grateful for the immense amount of support that we have from major talent, influencers, luminaries. We recently were able to honor Lil Nas X as our inaugural National Suicide Prevention Advocate of the Year, which was an immense honor for us, but also for Lil Nas X, who's been just such an important champion for visibility within the LGBTQ youth community, but also just such an advocate for LGBTQ youth mental health, really sharing his struggles, but also his perseverances, and really being a possibility model for so many LGBTQ young people out there, particularly Black and Brown LGBTQ young people that don't have a lot of role models or possibility models, to look up to. And, the reason why he was our inaugural advocate was because of everything that he does, but also his scale. I think it's really important for us to be able to align ourselves with important celebrities that, want to be a surrogate for a message such as Lil Nas X, because that means that very simply we can reach an audience of, he has 40 plus million followers. And we know by virtue of his audiences, who follows his music, who streams him, that audience is going to overlap heavily with who we're trying to reach. So those relationships are just really important. And also, we're always immensely grateful for what talent and people with these big platforms do for us in terms of driving added visibility for our mission, and really helping LGBTQ young people. I think it's just crucially important. But the other thing that I'd say about talent is that what we find to be very important is to look beyond the celebrities, right? Lil Nas X is such an important luminary for us, and we love everything that he does. But it's also important to, understand which micro influencers, which, people who aren't on the airwaves necessarily or aren't on your television screens, but are still making really major impacts and really engaging with LGBTQ young people. So, for us, it's about talent engagement, large and small, and finding representative talent that can speak with a level of authority to their fans and followers about our mission, and really get them to, reach out to us in their time of need, but also trust us if, that time of need unfortunately comes about.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know if you saw the light bulb going off in my head when you called Lil Nas X a possibility model, because that is such a fantastic term for what he represents. We could spend the whole 2 hours of today's live cast talking about all the things Lil Nas X has done culturally, because yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we are all grateful that we have him in our world and zeitgeist, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left, so I want to make sure I get to some of my additional questions for you, Josh, before I start opening it up to our audience for Q&A. So tell me about your near and long-term goals for the Trevor Project. What does the year ahead look like, and what are maybe some moonshots you have as well?
Yeah, great question. So we have a very well-defined strategic plan, and the cardinal goal for that strategic plan is serving 1.8 million crisis contacts, like I said earlier, by the end of our 23rd fiscal year. Everything that we're doing over the next calendar year is really moving the needle in terms of what I call important, like precursor metrics, such as awareness of our brand generally, but more importantly, consideration of our brand, as well as alignment of the Trevor Project to key intrinsics that we know move the needle for consideration. So that means that not only are we running a full year 4-wave study alongside our partners at Qualtrics to just, first have a baseline understanding of where we are and who knows about us and what they think about us, but also to action upon that. So we're hiring a head of content, and shortly thereafter standing up a content team to really build a content engine for us to create more resources, but also attend to some of the barriers that we know prevent individuals from using our services. We have these data points now to understand where we have room for improvement. So it's all about dispelling beliefs about, for instance, give you an example, we know from our data that one of the key barriers is that many LGBTQ young people feel that their problems aren't significant or severe enough to warrant our services. And that's not how we see our services. So a big mission for us is leveraging that data point, right, and reacting to it and dispelling that belief among LGBTQ young people, all in an effort at the end of the day to hit that 1.8 million goal, because we know that we have to move the needle in terms of all of those metrics to really garner that confidence for them to use our services. So over the next year, it's baselining our, our mainline marketing metrics, but also doing a lot to significantly improve them. And ultimately, by way of that, deliver those increases that we need to hit that strategic goal. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, the importance of language and how you talk to the LGBTQ plus community, because as you mentioned, Gen Z is really teaching us all a lot about, the ways they like to be addressed, the importance of pronouns and all those other details in terms of language. So what are some best practices you would share as far as how to connect authentically with LGBTQ plus consumers? Any do's and don'ts in terms of safe messaging and how to, address all types of identities on the spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I think firstly, it's right there, Andrew, in what you said, that the LGBTQ umbrella is multifarious. So really understanding that. And, in terms of brand marketing, being able to deliver visibility for for multiple for all of those elements that comprise the LGBTQ umbrella, and I think that means delivering more visibility to Black and Brown LGBTQ young people, trans and non-binary folk, and really centering the voice, the message on them. I think that means being very affirmative, but also passing the mic. One of the things that we absolutely, we champion and seek to do more of is really giving LGBTQ young people themselves the opportunity to engage with us and really speak to their lived experiences. And I think that's what's so crucially important. So in terms of safe messaging, like literal, tactical, like what copy to use, what copy not to use, there are some guidelines, but I would say generally speaking, stay away from terms that can seem stigmatizing. A lot of terms that we use in everyday parlance, can be stigmatizing, such as, the term, just saying like, "Oh, that was crazy," can connote something negative to somebody and harm an individual. So it's really just being really mindful of the word choice that you use, and the messaging that you convey, and also just being really authentic. And that means, like, as a brand, from the conception to the deployment and production, like making sure that people who are representative of the identities that you're depicting are part and parcel of that process, from the first meeting at the table, to the DP, to the individuals who are subjects of the film or the asset. Just being really intentional and making sure that inclusivity is not only in the end product, but through and through the entire conception of a campaign, and creative pursuit.
Absolutely. I'm going to quickly put myself on blast as far as inclusive language, because I am still trying to deprogram the use of the word "you guys," which I think I maybe used at one point on this panel, but and just little things like that also certainly.
You guys, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, and I think it's all about, I think in a personal sense, it's all about giving yourself empathy. DEI's a forever journey, but I think in terms of marketing, it's really crucial to get it right the first time, because as marketers, we all know that you only get so many chances. So it's really about making sure that you're affirming those LGBTQ young people you're speaking to up front. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know this isn't directly part of your remit, but I know the Trevor Project has a substantial, team that works with brands to help with some of that guidance. Can you speak briefly to how the team works with companies to make sure that they're, being inclusive in their messaging?
Yeah. And this isn't, like you said, isn't fully part of my remit. So I'll keep it brief and top level, but we work with a variety of different corporate partners to help amplify our mission, and really, drive visibility for what we do. And we're really grateful for that. And that comes in a multitude of different ways, from, social amplification campaigns to employee engagement, where, we work with a corporate partner's employee to share DEI principles and curricula, in terms of cultural competencies around LGBTQ lived experiences, product partnerships and stuff like that. I even was able to be featured alongside some of my colleagues in an Abercrombie and Fitch campaign for Pride on Instagram. So just really grateful for the partners that we have that support us and really do drive forward our mission and give us such significant added visibility for what we do.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to open up the Q&A and invite all of our attendees who are watching us on Zoom to ask any questions you may have on the Q&A widget on the bottom right-hand side. In the meantime, while we get some questions added, Josh, I want to talk real quick about as far as the other side of changes to how to address and identify consumers that have come up with this year in terms of marketplace changes with regards to cookies and online privacy, and even what Facebook and Meta have introduced. Can you tell me a little bit about how you're bracing for some of that change as it relates to, online campaigns?
Yeah, so part of it, like I mentioned earlier, is really contextual alignment. I think it's focusing. I think our strategy over the next year is going to not dispense with social. That I don't think that we could ever really do that. I think that's something that is a big decision and a big lever to pull for any marketer, but also focusing more on direct buys. What are the endemic spaces where we can reach LGBTQ young people without needing a great deal of data targeting, without needing to rely on algorithms? I think that that's really going to be an important pathway for us. Secondarily, really where our focus is at is just first party data. I've heard from friends and colleagues who work in the private sector space who are dealing with a lot of challenges, even with a huge data lake of first party data. I have friends in e-com and stuff like that. But as a not-for-profit, we're at a place where we're just beginning to really build that robust marketing stack. So I think part of another part of our strategies is how do we really collect and leverage first party data? How do we really sort of lean on ourselves to understand and capture our audiences rather than the platforms themselves? Because that is, from my vantage point, largely gonna fall by the wayside, at least in terms of our use case, which is really at every step reaching LGBTQ young people primarily. So it's just it's definitely an existential sort of moment, but one that we're really prepared for, and I think that anybody who's worked in marketing long enough and has dealt with Facebook long enough knows that this is more cyclical than anything. So we're going back into the war room and figuring out what's next for us.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit more about your kind of guiding principles as a marketer. You mentioned prior to joining Trevor Project early this year, you've spent time on the publisher and private sector side. So what's been the connecting thread that you take from each role? Like what are your kind of brand pillars as Josh Weaver?
Yeah. So, gratefully, a lot of my time in the publishing side was spent at youth oriented or like publications such as Vice, where I was able to understand the value of storytelling and authenticity as it pertains to speaking to and garnering the trust of young people in particular, particularly my generation, starting with my generation millennials, but particularly with Gen Z. They're very astute, very easy to pick up on, what today we would call virtue signaling or disingenuity. So I think that authenticity at the end of the day stands at the top of any, marketing principle or pillar or tenet that I have, because it's really what is the most efficacious principle in terms of garnering trust, which is what we need. In terms of getting LGBTQ young people to reach out to us. I would say beyond that, the only other principle I have is like brand trust. Marketing doesn't come from the mind of one. And oftentimes it doesn't come from the minds of only marketers. So, at the Trevor Project, we have a lot of open discourse, brainstorming, reaching across the aisle to figure out, what we want to do, but also having input from others, I think is really important, and understanding that all things marketing is iterative, and there's never sort of a perfect place. That goalpost is always moving.
Absolutely. Okay, we have a couple great questions already coming in the Q&A. So the first one is half a comment, which is to say, I just want to say I love the Trevor Project's latest comics, and I've seen them shared so much.
Yeah.
Their question is, what's the biggest or most seen mistake that most brands make when it comes to engaging LGBTQ plus consumers?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have like a specific answer. I can't call out one as being I can't call out a cardinal mistake rather. But I do think, going back to the top of the conversation before you introduced me, Andrew, where you really pinpointed the import of having these dialogues, talking to LGBTQ young people as brands throughout the year, and really focusing LGBTQ young people or LGBTQ people in general. Young people, that's our primary audience, but LGBTQ people, thinking of LGBTQ people as a significant audience pillar that deserves activation and engagement throughout the year, and not simply during key tentpoles. I think that's probably the most one of the more consequential mistakes that a typical brand would make in terms of engaging LGBTQ people. And I think what's more is that when you're engaging LGBTQ people year round, you get more of that shared voice, right? Because during Pride, the shared voice is so minimal and so convoluted with everybody that maybe save that most impactful message for another time. But Pride is still a moment for celebration. I don't think that Pride is a bad time to activate whatsoever. But I think that it's a yes and in terms of Pride.
I was just going to say, yeah, Pride and not Pride only or Pride or, for sure. Yeah, the fact that we're, it's the holiday season, and I already see so many commercials inclusive of LGBTQ plus couples and relationships. That's certainly a sign of positive progress as well. To answer this audience member's other question, yes, this will be archived on YouTube. So please go to visit Brand Innovators YouTube after this recording if you'd like to catch up on any panels you may have missed or rewatch any sessions as well. We have time for one more question if anyone wants to pop in the Q&A. But in the meantime, Josh, I'll ask you what I hope to hear from all of our panelists today, which is there an example of a LGBTQ inclusive campaign from a brand other than your own that you've personally been a fan of this year that you think is a great example?
Well, I mean, I that's hard because that means I have to put somebody on the spot. So I will mention again the campaign that I mentioned briefly just now about Abercrombie and Fitch and the partnership that we have with them and did in 2021 for Pride, which is really great because it went beyond just messaging, but we worked alongside them to create a gender inclusive collection of clothes that were, really centered around pridefulness, around being your authentic self. And I think that is really a big exemplar of where brands should be going. And it's not only about the messaging, but it's also about what you're doing, internally and as a brand, whether it's through product or services that, helps move the needle for affirming LGBTQ people as well. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and just to offer my personal favorite, I think the Ubereats commercial with Lil Nas X we mentioned earlier, and Elton John, where they just full, funny, hilarious, authentic selves. Like that's such a huge moment. Like, because I definitely think I'm a big believer that inclusive messaging is just as important as an inclusive media plan. And the fact that I see that commercial on the Today Show, on, Jimmy Fallon, on everything, like not just in queer spaces, I think is just as important as the messaging itself.
Yeah.
So,
because it's not only queer people, it's not only queer people that need to see that visibility. It's everyone.
That's right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Visibility progress.
I do love that commercial. I do love that commercial, by the way. So I agree with you there.
Same. Well, hey, you got to be an Abercrombie model this year, so that's pretty cool as well.
A model might be pushing it, but
ambassador, whatever. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Josh, I can't thank you enough for kicking things off. This has been a fantastic discussion and a great way to set a high bar for the rest of today's live cast. So thank you, Josh, for joining us, and thank you everyone for helping us kick things off today. So with that, I want to introduce our next lineup of speakers. We have a very exciting panel coming up next. Joining us on the virtual stage is Copper Joy Overton, she, her, hers. She's the digital experience lead, Skin Health West at Johnson & Johnson. Joining Copper Joy is her colleague Reed Harris, he, him, his, the senior customer development manager at Vogue International at Johnson & Johnson. And they are joined by Matt Wagner, he, him, his, VP of Client Services at Target 10. And our moderator for this next discussion is Annette Fonte, she, her, Ella. She is the EVP of Managing Director of VML Y&R Commerce. So please welcome to the stage, Copper, Reed, Matt, and Annette.
Everybody, thank you for having
Hello.
us.
Hello.
Thanks, Annette. I'll let you take it away.
Thanks. Hi. It just sort of took me into that awesome transition world of Wave. I am super thrilled. I'm super thrilled to be here with you guys for one reason, because the work that you guys have done on this platform, on this campaign, as a consumer is awesome. As a family member, I am super thrilled to see something that's actually done that isn't stereotypical, that it's actually comes from the heart. So that's what really we're going to be talking about today. Like, how did this program come to life? How did you make it happen? And all the juicy bits on to help others kind of make it come to life as well. So hey, I go by Ani, by the way. So feel free to holler for anyone that's out there listening and playing. Know that you can do Q&As at any time. I'll probably take some time at the back end of this to do some Q&As as well. But with that, let's kick this off. How are you guys doing?
Great. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
And nice to meet you in person, Ani.
Oh, thank you. All right, so Care with Pride. Tell me, all right, first of all, how did this initiative even begin? So before it all got started and became something amazing, I thought I'd sort of let Copper Reed sort of give us a little bit of a heads up. Like, how did this begin? How did you manage to even get the wheels on this bus?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. I've been involved with the initiative since 2012. It began in 2011 with a vision. So here we are 10 years later. And that vision was from one of our founders, Scott Crichton, who was a VP of marketing at Johnson & Johnson at the time. And he saw a short film called Trevor about a LGBTQ plus boy who was being bullied by family and friends at school, and recognized that bullying at the time, back in 2011, was a real issue and making a lot of headlines in the press. And he was so moved by that film, and that he thought that Johnson & Johnson and our brands could be doing more to address that issue. And knowing that our brands have these shared values and support of the community, he thought they could really make a bigger impact as a collective under an umbrella program. So that is how he started Care with Pride in year one. And we had a partnership with PFLAG and started creating safe action school kits to prevent anti-bullying and education around anti-bullying in schools. And here we are today, 10 years later, still with the same purpose, championing love, equality, and care for all people within the LGBTQ community. The program is volunteer-led, which it was at that time too, which I think is a really, really important piece of our program that distinguishes it from other programs out there. It involves over 12 of our brands, cross-sector brands, over 2,000 members of our Open and Out employee resource group are engaged by this initiative, and 14 retail partners. So it's grown a lot since day one, but that essentially is what brought us here: Scott's vision and the movement to do more.
I love that it started with content, right? So I think at its core, that's so powerful. We talk about and we'll talk a little bit. A lot of what your platform is really about building content and spreading that word. So the fact that it was born from content is super powerful, I think, as well. For all those content creators, what you do actually does matter. We're gonna tee up to ground everyone a little bit on the amazing work that you guys have done. There's going to be a little bit of a video. So Matt, you get this awesome brief. That is, how do you bring this to life this year? Tell us a little bit before, as we tee up the video, tell us a little bit about like what was it when it came over to your hands?
Sure. And, something I think that's really interesting and important to note as well is this was by no means J&J Consumer Health's first toe in the water when it came to LGBTQ. J&J had actually been supporting and engaging with LGBTQ consumers since 2001, for a full decade before Care with Pride even came into being. And as a matter of fact, it was Tylenol PM that was the first ever consumer good product that ever marketed to queer individuals. So that's just one of a number of firsts that J&J has had over the years. So we were really, and Target 10 had been working on all of that for that full decade in advance as well. So we were like pretty well teed up and prepared to engage with Care with Pride. And like Reed said, we had a number of sort of these vision meetings with Scott. And, luckily Scott was a senior person at J&J, so we had some pull and could access some purse strings. And through a lot of collaboration, we were able to make this thing happen. But it was very much like holding hands and jumping in together. Not knowing exactly how it would turn out. It was a little like, it's a little cliche, but the whole building the airplane while it's flying. But it was a fantastic first year, and it only really evolved since then. So what this video is it's a couple of minutes. It's a really nice highlight that overarchingly shows what the program has become in its 10th decade, its 10th year rather.
Hey y'all, I just received Johnson & Johnson's Care with Pride package, and look at all of these amazing goodies. Like there's a garden grow kit and like makeup wipes, which I need, and also like a little tambourine.
Care with Pride is our J&J Credo-based initiative with a mission to support love, equality, and care for the LGBTQ plus community.
With the global pandemic disrupting the in-person Pride celebrations we know and love, we've taken a step back to reimagine what it means to celebrate Pride Month, as the essence of Pride is still very much alive and well.
At a high level, Care with Pride can be broken into 3 pillars: communication, activation, and advocacy. Our brands partner with positive, influential voices representing marginalized communities to share awareness and support around key issues facing the LGBTQIA community. Our activation pillar is how our brands and employees engage in our local communities. We also partner with our retailers by developing limited edition Pride products, where purchase drives donation to an LGBTQ beneficiary.
The support of organizations like this that really pushes that awareness, especially what you're doing at Target. I love it. I will be buying every one of those products and telling everybody to go and support that.
And lastly, but most importantly, our advocacy pillar. This is where we partner with LGBTQIA nonprofits, such as our national partner, Family Equality.
From Pride festivals to Family Week in Provincetown, to your local pharmacy, Care with Pride support of Family Equality has continued to grow.
Care with Pride Initiative has partnered with Family Equality to send all of this to 500 families whose lived experience embodies the diversity shown on this beautiful artwork.
That gesture from Care with Pride reminded those families that even though we could not be together, we could still celebrate the joy we find in our community at Family Week at our home.
Since its inception, Care with Pride has actually donated over $1 million to LGBTQA nonprofits.
Thank you to Johnson & Johnson for all you do for our community. They are truly walking the walk.
I thank everybody across the country, around the world, for your help and effort in making this program still vital, so relevant, and growing as the times have changed.
Awesome. Amazing. So it's kind of neat because we talked about, right, content being what birthed this whole idea and content being at the core of this. So Matt, tell me a little bit about, so Care with Pride, the role of creators, influencers seems to be, I mean, obviously the brands are at the core and at the heart, but really this is what brought them to life. How did you find these people? What role did they play in bringing this idea to life truly?
Yeah, so content, like you mentioned, is a huge part of our communications pillar. And the way that Care with Pride works, if you kind of think of it, Care with Pride is sort of the umbrella initiative, but it's supported and comprised of the participating brands. And so what we do is we'll identify an influencer per brand. So we'll look for an influencer who both ladders into particular brand values, consumer targets, et cetera, but also overarchingly lives into the vision and the spirit of Care with Pride at a macro level. And something that we take great care to do is identify and work with, partner with influencers, creators who we like to say, go beyond the usual suspect. You know, there's sort of a crop of influencers who are awesome that you just kind of see over and over again because they're sort of that top tier establishment influencer group. And listen, sometimes you need to reach millions of people kind of in a snap. And folks like that are awesome for that kind of celebrity types. But we really want to go a little bit deeper and reach out to and engage with activists and folks who are interested in education and advocacy, and also those who might make use of some of the participating brands in a way that's a little different from what you might expect. So one example is for Band-Aid, which is a participating brand. You might expect, oh, that'll probably be like a mom influencer or something along those lines. We actually decided to work with an interior designer named Shavonda Gardner, who's a queer woman of color. Because if you think about it, you're doing a lot of interior design work. You're inevitably going to have a cut or a boo-boo at some point. And so to kind of combine a number of these facets of people's identities and personalities and finding individuals who have really high engagement, which is something that we're really proud of over the years, our influencer content, I think because of these reasons, because of how we work with folks who we're selecting, our engagement rates tend to be 3-4 times industry standards, industry benchmarks rather. And the last thing I'll mention is we give our creators a lot of freedom to talk about and share through the lens of Care with Pride in ways that coincide with their personal interests and passions. And Copper can probably speak to this more as well, but we're not handing talking points or scripts or things like that to these folks and saying, regurgitate this in your own personal way. We're really saying, like, here's maybe an overarching theme of where we're looking to play, but you tell me, how do you want to bring this to life? Or is there a nonprofit organization you're passionate about that you'd like to signal boost? We're all in for that. We'll donate to them and then have you talk about it. There's a lot to play with there, and we love to offer that freedom.
Well, it's the content that you created was super relevant. And yeah, I'm going to flip over to Copper next, right? Because it goes back to that. The reason why you have the liberty to be able to give people that freedom is because you had something that really resonated with those people that you've selected to be part of it. And so Copper, you have the envious role of dual hats, right? So you have a day job of being sort of like the brand lead from a digital perspective. So tell us a little bit about, was there a different approach when you shifted into developing or working on Care with Pride this year within your overarching role with so many cool brands?
Yeah, absolutely. I think oftentimes when you think of a brand partnership or a campaign, when you're working with an influencer or creator, you think of just that time period of when content goes live and you have to post X amount of posts during this time frame, and then that's kind of the end, and then we'll do a wrap report. Thank you for your help. We'll see you next time, kind of thing. But one of the most amazing things that I love about working with Care with Pride is these are true partnerships that last for a long time throughout the year, rather than just your typical maybe during the month of June for a Care with Pride partnership. So you will see a lot of our content is still in the process of going through approvals and going live across the influencer and creator channels, as well as some of our brand channels as well. So one of the beautiful things about working with Care with Pride and the Target 10 team is they're really great at looking at creators and influencers who not only want to do a partnership because they support a brand or love a Neutrogena or love a Band-Aid or an Exuviance, but because they have something that they care about genuinely that aligns with our brand purpose and our initiatives through Care with Pride, that we want to help elevate their voices as well. So not only do we look to them to support our brands, our products, and our initiatives, but we want them to tell their story. We want them to say what is meaningful to them. How can we at Care with Pride and J&J make a difference to make sure that all the things that matter to you are being highlighted throughout this partnership. So you will see through a lot of the partnership and posts that we have, a lot of them don't actually contain any product. They're more so about the creators and influencers telling their coming out stories, sharing tidbits around what it means to be trans, or educating around pronouns and things that really help elevate the true purpose of Care with Pride, rather than just pushing product, which is not always bad, but there's a time and a place for everything. And what Care with Pride is we are here to help support the community rather than just talk about the community. And I think that's the huge differentiating factor.
Yeah, well, it gives it that authenticity, right? You're right, because if every piece of content happened to be all about pushing a product, like, we get it, like, it's how do you bring value into this? And so there's throughout my career, right, there's a lot of one of the big challenges is brands wanting to participate in a multi-branded effort versus a solo brand effort, right? So what was participation like as you guys started? Again, I know this has been going on for 10 years, so you have a little bit of groundswell, a little bit happening, but I'm sure every year it's like that, beginning that conversation. What's the engagement from the brand perspective, and how do they see this as part of their overarching portfolio of marketing tools?
Yeah, and I think that this is something that Reed can allude to from a product perspective, but something that is really interesting for me is that a lot of brands, even outside of J&J, other brands and companies that I've worked on, they don't always know how to best communicate certain things. And I think that that's kind of where some messaging can fall a little flat, because they're overthinking it. What are the things that we need to say to show that we support the LGBTQIA+ community? There's nothing that you need to say. You just need to show up. You just need to listen. You just need to be there and be supportive. Maybe reshare something. There's nothing necessarily that you have to do rather than support. And I think that that's where a lot of the foundation of brand support comes from, is just supporting those things. So whether we work with brands that want to do product specific packaging, which is something new to Care with Pride, or relatively new to Care with Pride, we can do that. But we also had brands that just wanted to find a way to become involved. So we had within the donation boxes, we had Zarbee's just put in vitamins for the families. They didn't have Pride specific packaging, but they wanted to be able to contribute to the purpose. We have brands brands that reach out to a lot of our creators and influencers and thank them for the work that they're doing, just to show that interconnectivity. And a lot of what we're trying to do here at J&J is really just kind of continue the purpose and continue what Care with Pride stands for on a year-round basis. So yes, it's fantastic during Pride Month, but how can we continue to show up for the community on a consistent basis? So they're looking to people like us and people that from a digital perspective too, like giving them those tidbits of who is the audience that you're trying to reach? How can you make sure that you are being inclusive during your marketing? How can you make sure that you don't necessarily have to have one dedicated post a month that talks about LGBTQIA marketing? Like, you know, you don't have to have these things that you check off on a box. You just have to show up when it matters the most and in an authentic way that resonates with the brand too, because of course you don't want to do rainbow washing either or seem performative. You want to make sure that it is authentic to the brand and has true alignment with a lot of the initiatives that we stand for across J&J.
Yeah, and
I didn't know, Reed, if you wanted to mention the product thing, because I think that that's a really fascinating story too.
Yeah, no, I can add to that. I mean, you know, what's behind brands, right? It's people like you and me that is fueling the strategy, that is fueling the identity of the brand. And you know, I'm very pleased to work for a company like Johnson & Johnson that attracts good people, that attracts people that, you know, are wanting to make the world, you know, a better place for tomorrow. And I think we see those qualities in our brands, in the content they share externally, but even you know, from when we were developing our Pride products, which didn't come to existence until 2019. And I think that there's a common misconception that you know, Care with Pride sometimes is all about the products. It's not. It's a program that has existed well before that, and people see those products and they can relate to them, and so they talk about them. But those didn't come along until many years after. And even in developing those products, we worked with each of the brands and our open and out employee resource group to make sure that we were developing creative that really touched and spoke to the community, and that our statement of authenticity on that package was the right statement. So there was a lot of internal conversations that happened about how do we do this product, and how do we do it right, and how do we, you know, drive donation to a LGBTQ beneficiary when that purchase is made, so that it stands out as much more than a physical product that, you know, is a transaction in retail. And I think that, you know, that little extra, that going a little bit further deeper into how can we make change through this is another, you know, representation of what Care with Pride is all about.
I dig that story, because I think oftentimes a lot of brand marketers might think that the solution is creating the product. The fact that it took you a long time too sounds like a very negative way of saying that, but you didn't need it for all those years to create an initiative, right? And still create that communication and that engagement. And I think that what that gave you is a lot, again, back to authenticity. And so I'm going to circle back, because one of the things that's really relevant about this program is it's not just an external program. You guys just didn't do a program out to build consumer swirl. This is actually part of your DNA internally. So I want to get through like how this goes beyond a consumer activation, but I wanted to get back to those packages that you guys created, because you reached out to a heck of a lot of families to make a difference and make an impact with those packages. While cool, right? Everyone likes getting swag and stuff. I think there's a lot more to it that really, again, drove that authenticity of the program. I don't know if you guys, Matt, I don't know if you want to start, and y'all can jump in terms of what made those packages different.
Yeah, sure. So the origin story for these packages is, as was mentioned in the reel, our national beneficiary for, I think, our 8th year now is Family Equality. And they're a national advocacy group for LGBTQ-based families. And for 25 years, they've had an event in Provincetown, Massachusetts, which is a very well-known queer vacation destination in Cape Cod, called Family Week. And every August for 25 years straight, somewhere, you know, increasing each year, of course, but as of 2019, it was 750 queer families would gather in this like postage stamp of a town. And you would literally, it was all queer families. And so it was a really special place, a magical environment for these families who 99% of the time, they're the odd ones out. They're the only queer family in their town, in their school, in their doctor's office. So it meant a lot for these folks to be able to attend this event. And and we had been, as a sponsor of Family Equality, also sponsoring Family Week, showing up in all different ways, events, activations, care packages at the events, etc. So we were like, we can't go to the event, it's canceled for obvious reasons. Folks are stuck at home, they're going a little crazy. How can we still bring some joy to these people? And so we were like, well, we've got some Pride products, but how can we make it even bigger? And so we just started brainstorming and kicking around ideas. And we were like, well, why don't we get some goodies from P-Town, like candy from a famous candy shop that's there, or a coloring book from a well-known queer artist whose studio is based there. Include that in the box. Why don't we work with a well-known queer artist to design a puzzle of P-Town that he makes custom and then shares about on Instagram, and include that in the box. And so it was this really carefully curated box of product, of games, of toys, of garden grow kit for parents, for kids of all ages. And we sent it to these families who had to sign up for it through Family Equality. And we were like, listen, guys, essentially, we know that a lot of you are suffering right now, both kids and parents in different ways. And we want you to know that we're thinking about you. Family Equality is thinking about you, and we're here to support you, even in the absence of the event. And I think that really meant a lot to people. And there was even a letter we got that I get choked up every time I think about it, from a medical professional in Boston who sent us this like multi-paragraph letter just talking about how, this was in August of 2020. It was like one of the worst moments. And he was like, I couldn't believe when I got this box what a difference it made. And that was very much the sentiment. And this year, even though things were opening up again, Family Week was still canceled out of abundance of caution. So we were like, we're going to do it again. We're going to come up with new stuff, new items. We have new Pride products. We made it a little less P-Town focused because we kind of expanded the audience to whom we were distributing it, to make sure that we were reaching some folks who were less advantaged as well, who might not have been able to make it to P-Town in the first place. But that was kind of how this package came about. And now, even though we're very likely going to be able to go back to P-Town for Family Week next year, we're still going to keep the care package going in some way, shape, or form to make sure that we're still able to kind of distribute joy to those who might not be able to make it to some of these events. But, it was really a labor of love. And the reaction that we got really, I think, made everyone feel that very authentically.
Yeah. So we're bringing this magic to people's homes, but we're also uplifting small-owned LGBTQ artists and businesses at the same time. So it really felt special in the fact that we were, doing both in that initiative.
Right. And you end up with long-lasting brand love, right? So it's not just a one and done kind of situation. I think the magic of this program is you're serving up something of value at a time when people need it, and you're not saying buy me, you're basically saying we're here for you. And long term, doesn't that create a much more, when you look at this as a business model perspective, right? So it's not just the right thing to do, but it's actually the great thing to do from a business perspective as well. And
I think that it really comes down to, people always think, okay, how do we gain brand equity? How do we gain, brand sentiment? How do you continue to make sure that your consumers come back to you? And for us, it's like, okay, how do we make sure that our consumers and the people that we work with know that we care about them and support them? Because when you do that, regardless, they will show up for you. I mean, the same way as your friends, you support your friends, they'll show up for you. And that's who we are as a company. That's who we are as an initiative through Care with Pride. It's just consistently making sure that people feel comfortable, people feel welcome, and people know that J&J Care with Pride will continuously show up and support them.
That's right. And it's not just pushing products, it's actually serving up information and content that actually is relevant in a way that's right. Love it. Yeah. And Reed, one of the things you mentioned, you top line really quick on how you guys interacted with Open and Out, but I mean, this is not just a marketing program per se, right? So this is something that also connects internally within your organization. Do you want to talk a little bit about, how this is a platform beyond just a marketing platform, if you will?
Yeah, Open and Out is our internal employee resource group, and they are true big partners of ours. Historically, in a non-pandemic year, we sponsor over 40 global Pride parades, and Open and Out has chapters in over 90 chapters in 4 regions of the world. So we're always trying to get out into our local communities and share that message of love, care, and support. And in a non-pandemic year, those parades are really that time for us all in our local communities here in the US or globally to get into our community in March. And we design collateral, banners, posters, t-shirts, flags that we carry. All those things that our employees would be proud to share and celebrate as employees of Johnson & Johnson in our communities. And when the pandemic happened and we couldn't gather in our local parades and from May to December, we pivoted to that virtual Pride event. And then we've been keeping that virtual Pride event going as a kickoff to June Pride, because it was such a celebrated, fun event that engaged, our internal partners, our external partners and our customers, our nonprofit beneficiaries, and our consumers. It was open to anyone internally and externally to call into, and we could feature a lot of the nonprofits that we support through that event. And then throughout the year, even after June Pride, we try to partner with Open and Out to celebrate or recognize key LGBTQ moments that happen throughout the year. For instance, last month we wore purple for Spirit Day and had some campus activation activities around Spirit Day and anti-bullying around LGBTQ youth. Open and Out hosted an Global Ally Week, which was just unbelievably inspiring week-long event that brought together our employees to talk about the importance of allyship, both in the LGBTQ community and outside of the community. Just recently on November 20th, we recognized Transgender Day of Remembrance, a very important day that recognizes those trans lives lost due to violence and hatred. Our campuses raised the trans flag. Our brand shared content and the trans flag socially. So we wanted to make sure that we are reflecting what we're doing at our campuses, also externally in our communities and through to our consumers. Tomorrow, December 1st, marks World AIDS Day. We have a big World AIDS Day event, a virtual event, where one of our Care with Pride brands, Janssen Positively Fearless, will be featured, as well as one of our Care with Pride influencers to talk about the important work that Janssen is doing on the infectious disease front in battling HIV and AIDS. So this conversation is not one that just is a one and done 1 month conversation. This is something that runs year round in a multitude of ways. And we're so proud of that fact.
And something I would add that's just, I think, maybe coming through here, and granted, this is a benefit of a program that is fairly decently sized at this point, and luckily it's only getting bigger, but there's a dynamism to the program in that there's this like constellation of creators, employees, events, partners, and we crisscross and intersect them in addition to kind of the verticals that they each occupy. So there may be a communications plan that's full of creators and influencer content and whatnot, but we'll also bring a creator or two to a conference that we speak at, or they'll attend a virtual event that we put on, or we'll have an internal conversation with them about what's next for Care with Pride. What are you hearing in your communities? And some of it is planned months in advance. Some of it happens spur of the moment, but there's a really nice, both kind of very planned, structured aspect, but there's also a really nice organic, dynamic element, which I really give great credit to this team for being able to flow with. It's very much a personality thing too, I think, which is part of our chemistry. But there's a willingness, and you might think J&J, I'm surprised that they would do that. It's like not at all. They're among the most open to like, oh, you want to do something next week? Like, let's jump on a call right now and talk about it. And you don't often have that freedom, I think, with other programs. And that's something that helps make this really special. And it also lets us respond to things, both good and bad, in real time in a way you might not expect from like a big company.
Well, it embeds it into the company's DNA, right? So you're not resuscitating, a program and, dusting it off every year when you get around to Pride Week, which I love, right? So by making sure that it's part of your organization's DNA, it enables you to continue to give it meaning and growth. And as a result, Matt, you're right, it becomes super nimble. It gives you that ability to be nimble. And so you reached out to communities, you made it real, you gave them some value. You made it part of your organization, but you didn't stop there. So Copper, you guys went back and you actually also did some micro grant strategy overlay into this to add some additional help. Can you talk to us a little bit about, how did that come to be? Why, and why did it matter? And what was the role of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of, what I'm just going to keep going back to this. It's how do we continue to support the community, and how do we also elevate the voices of our creators and our influencers that we're working with? So a lot of the micro grants that we provide are in partnership or on behalf of our creators and influencers. So I'll give this example that I love for our Ubereats creator and influencer, Britt Barron. She was very passionate about the Okra Project, which is providing food for trans families within the African American community as well. And a lot of what they do is very important to her and her community. So we did a partnership where she did a Instagram live on the Ubereats platform, where she was giving the history of okra while cooking okra and sharing important facts about the communities, because based on her intersectionality, and how do we continue to elevate those voices too? Because I think that's something that's very important to me too, being a member of both communities. Intersectionality is something that is not always talked about. You can be in minority in one aspect, but you're also a minority in another aspect as well. So how do we continue to show up for our creators and influencers for those moments that matter to them? So a lot of the work from a microgrant perspective, Target 10 does a fantastic job, looking for these organizations and honing in on these organizations in partnerships with our creators and influencers and saying, hey, how can we make this work for Care with Pride? Or not even how do we make it work? How can we make sure that Care with Pride can show up for this smaller organization? We work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, but I think microgrants are sometimes the ones that really matter, because even the smallest difference can really impact people, and to a level that they just don't understand or really acknowledge. And I think that sometimes, these big initiatives like Care with Pride, you often see high dollar amounts of donations left and right across, the organization, but people don't really pay attention to the small moments that matter. And I think that that's something that's very important to us too. It doesn't really matter the size of the support. It's just the fact that we're constantly showing up.
Yeah, and to me, it goes back to authenticity, right? So the fact that you actually understand and you've engaged with the community in a way that feels a lot more intimate, unlocks those opportunities, but gives you the awareness of how you can help and where this program can help. Reed, this is just the beginning. So apparently you're going global with this now.
Yeah. So great news on that front. So, J&J, the world's largest healthcare company, right, with over 130,000 employees globally. With the success that we've had in the U.S., we're at a pivotal point in 10 years. We thought, this couldn't be a better time to bring this to other countries and regions. So we, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again, just a credit to our executive sponsor, Mike Marquis, and our North American leadership team for recognizing the importance of this initiative and wanting to bring it to our other campuses and countries that we operate in. So we put together a 3-year growth plan, expansion plan, and proud to say that we're expanding globally starting next year with 5 countries, and then 8 countries after that, and the remainder of the countries that we operate in 2024. We're really excited. I mean, I think each country is going to face its own challenges and opportunities, which we're going to learn more about as we take this globally, and hopefully using the US as an example, put together a comparable program to address some of those challenges and be that support system, not only for our employees at our J&J campuses in those countries, but the consumers and the communities that exist in those areas.
Something to kind of bring it full circle a little bit, what I'm really excited about for this global expansion, I mentioned at the very beginning that, way before Care with Pride even started, Tylenol PM, which is a J&J brand, was one of the first to do OTC marketing to the community. And an anecdote that's always stuck with me that my boss who runs Target 10, Matthew Manello, shared with me before I joined the agency. It was like 2004, and Tylenol PM had just put out its first gay marketing. And the brand manager who had approved all of this had a visitor to his office, and it was someone, he works at the Fort Washington office, which also had a facility kind of right next to the offices. And a plant worker actually came to his office and said, I saw the work that you did I'm gay, I'm not necessarily out at work, but I can't tell you, this almost 20 years ago, how much it means to me that the company that I work for put this out. And I think especially, in J&J, we're not going to shy away from areas or regions that may not be the friendliest to LGBTQ people. So not that things are perfect here in the US by any means, but it's a heck of a lot better than a lot of other places. And I think to bring something like Care with Pride to regions, to J&J employees, to those communities where things maybe are not as good as they are here, will really have an impact and can, will start to have even more of a ripple effect in addition to the work that's being done on the ground.
It's going to be fascinating to see how the different markets, what is it that resonates and what is that's relevant, and what are the topics that are going to be, that are going to pop, that are going to be unique to those individual markets across the globe. That's so cool. I'm cognizant that we have only 3 minutes left. I was gonna say 7 minutes.
Wow.
We have 3 minutes before I get kicked off, but we have a question, and then I do have an answer, an added question too. But so Scott shot us a note saying that we indicated that Care with Pride had evolved over time. What changes do you anticipate over the next 2+ years, and how will it continue to be vital and relevant to the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah,
So,
well, I think part of the magic of this program is that we evaluate every year what the next year is going to look like. And the program has evolved. When I say evolved, it started with brands offering coupons and coupon books and us handing those coupon books out in our respective pride parades that happen from May to December. Then we pivoted into, as social media became more prominent with Facebook, a social first campaign by running brand sponsored ads on Facebook, to now, our influencer strategy and partnering with uplifting voices about causes that they care about. So, I think one, global expansion, obviously we're working on that, starting those conversations now in Canada, UK, Germany, Brazil, and Japan. For next year. And so that's going to be a big piece of our planning program. Also looking at how we can amplify what we're doing with some paid media, and how we bring, our more nonprofits in those countries to the forefront. Obviously, there's nonprofits here based in the US, but those don't extend across some of the borders. So getting a better understanding of what nonprofits exist in the regions that we're expanding to, and how we can build up those and drive awareness and support for those nonprofits as we bring this program to life. So a lot of exciting things over the next 2 years, but all headed in the right direction to make Care with Pride a more global program with a larger impact.
Perfect, right on the money. It has been, I get that, I was like, perfect timing. I'm gonna guess that someone from Brand Innovators will be popping in with a big hook, but before they kick me out, I do want to say again, this has been an honor to meet you guys and be a part of this conversation. I do think that you've created something that's truly special, in that it's not a program that's just, you did it and then we celebrated and you're out, but it's something that it's a commitment. It's something that you hand down within the organization, and now are handing across borders. So kudos to you guys. It's been an honor to be here with you. I appreciate the time.
Same. Thank you very
much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been fantastic.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ani, for moderating that fantastic panel. Talking quickly about the evolution of Care with Pride. Reed, I believe you were on our stage at one of our first LGBTQ plus live casts. So to see how the program has evolved even in those 18 months has been really impressive. So thank you all for your continued commitment. Well, with that, we are at the last session of the day. So I'm pleased to introduce our final speaker for you. Joining us next is Jonathan Roman, he, him, his. Jonathan is an industry advisor for growth marketing technology, most recently an alum of EA as well as Ancestry. So joining Jonathan for this discussion is our own Ariel Russo, she, her, hers. Ariel is the Director of Content and Community here on our team at Brand Innovators. So please welcome to the stage, Jonathan and Ariel.
Hello, so nice to be here.
So great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
Hello.
How is everyone? Let me just.
Great.
My name. Hi. Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
Doing good. Getting ready for the move back west. I've been in New York for the past year, so wrapping some stuff up and then making the cross-country trek with my dog and my husband. But super excited to be talking today. I've been doing a lot of conversations about the metaverse. I think everybody's talking about the metaverse, all of that, and then the future of identity management. So it's just nice to be part of a conversation, which is why I'm really excited to talk today about marketing in the LGBTQ plus community. It's a little bit of a divergence from, a lot of the stuff I've been talking about lately, and something that's extremely important in my mind.
Totally agree. So let's begin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We have truly an exciting session for you all today. So before we begin, I'm going to start with who I am and why I'm here. I'm Ariel Russo, pronouns are she, her, hers. I lead community efforts here for brand innovators, and a huge part of this rewarding role means I get the opportunity to work with the most innovative leaders of today while facilitating crucial industry discussions like these. And as a member of the queer community myself, today marks an especially important conversation. Which brings me to the direct purpose of this session. Today, we will welcome innovator, marketing expert, and industry leader, Jonathan Roman. In addition to Jonathan's impressive track records at brands like Electronic Arts and Ancestry, and now his new role approaching with SiriusXM, he, like me, is a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and more so has led some super remarkable efforts to support all of the amazing queer identifying humans out there. So without further ado, let's begin. Welcome. All right, so we have a video for you first to play. I will let that play.
Hi, gay. Happy Pride Month. We are sashaying away with deals. This month at the Butter Shop, we're running a special deal. If you can prove that you're queer, you get 3 pints off your choice of creamed, chucked, or drowned butter. And if you do mouth stuff, you get 4. We love gay, and it's awesome. So come visit. And we also make candles now. Wouldn't a candle be nice for gay stuff? In the bedroom or just hanging out. Yeah, we wouldn't. Wouldn't your partner want butter from the original old maid's home? We've been making butter since 1945, and we've been accepting all people since the last 4 months. So yeah, we're gagging for you to come take a taste of Cecily's Butter Shop at Cecily's Butter Shop. My friend's mom, I think is gay, so we think it's cool. Turn it off, Willard.
I love this so much. So this is a content creator on TikTok that I love to death. And she put this out, I think, during this past Pride Month, this content. And I think this was a great video, which is why I asked it to be kind of played to demonstrate, it's exaggerated, of course, but to demonstrate what certain brands look like when they are, jumping in during Pride Month, trying to celebrate Pride, and, the other days or months of the year, there's just nothing contributing to the LGBTQ plus community. So I absolutely love this content creator on TikTok, and this video, I think, is such a great way to open up this conversation.
100% definitely breaks the ice. And if that video is, not telling of certain brands during Pride Month, I don't know what is. So Jonathan, you have quite an impressive background working across some very well-known brands. And before we go into this conversation, can you dive a little bit into your story? Tell us a little bit about your journey, where you started, and of course, tell us about the series of events that led you to where you are today.
Sure, yeah. So out of college, my first job, and I love to talk about this just because, this kind of pertains to the topic we're talking about today. I worked for a Japanese green tea company, and I was a district sales representative, which was kind of a crazy job. I was located back in New York at the time, and I think I was just coming to terms with my sexuality and kind of who I was as a human being. And what I encountered on the job was, very different than kind of what I experience today in a lot of the companies I choose to work with, and a lot of the things that I've helped to build into some of these companies and really support. I had a lot of people that were not accepting of the LGBTQ plus community. And at that time, since it was located in New York and we had different people representing and going to different parts of New York, we had a lot of jokes about certain parts of New York that people covered. Back then, this was like more than 10 years ago, Chelsea was kind of an area in New York that was predominantly like kind of the gayborhood in New York. Now it's Hell's Kitchen. So that's kind of shifted over the years. But you would have people that made jokes about like kind of, oh, you're going to Chelsea. You better put on your hot pink Speedo if you want to sell some green tea today. Things like that, which really didn't allow me to bring my authentic self to work. I was really kind of afraid to be my true self. I had to do a lot of like masking, or, you know, if people were talking about what they were doing over the weekend, there was a lot of me either straight up lying and replacing, you know, I went on a date with a guy with, I went on a date with a girl, or just being like, I didn't do anything during Valentine's Day when I did, just to avoid the topic of conversation at hand. So it really impacted my quality of life. And from there, I kind of discovered an opportunity that was available working agency side. So that's when I got kind of my start agency side. I wasn't happy at that last job, of course, wasn't able to bring my true authentic self to work. And I had a friend who reached out to me about getting involved in ad operations over at Group M. So joined that, kind of came in defensively, you know, kind of the same mindset I had working at that green tea job. And then was amazed to discover how many people were part of the LGBTQ plus community that worked there. So I had direct interaction with people that were openly gay in the office, which was just so refreshing to see. And as a young marketer, me being able to go into an environment where I was like, oh, I can talk about, you know, the date I went on with a guy, or somebody I was dating at the time, and a vacation we took, and stuff that everybody, I think, that isn't part of the community maybe takes for advantage a little bit. You know, you don't even think about it. You're like, what did you do? You know, I went on vacation with my wife or my spouse or my partner. And I had an amazing boss there. So this was like a big pivotal moment for me, who actually supported me when I came out to my parents. So my boss offered me her couch. She said, if something goes wrong, if your parents aren't accepting, like, you can sleep on my couch. Just made me very comfortable about being my true authentic self at work. So from there, I worked a number of years agency side, kind of worked for a majority of the big holding companies, supported a number of different clients, and got to see some amazing work on some of the Pride Month and LGBTQ plus focused campaigns that were done. And then eventually made my way brand side, working for Ancestry, which had an amazing ERG team there. And then Electronic Arts, which also had, it's voted one of the best places to work, I think, for the past 5 years for the human rights campaign organization. And I've always made it a focus of mine, especially when I moved brand side and I kind of was at a little bit of a higher positioning in these organizations, to join ERGs. And we're going to be talking a lot about ERGs today and kind of how that impacts your marketing tactics and efforts. Just because I think about, where I was when I first started and joined the workforce for that one company, and how I couldn't be myself. And then where I am today, where I can be as loud and as proud as I want. I can wear all the floral pattern shirts I want without fear of discrimination. So I want to kind of be part of these additional parts of the organization that really make it a safe space and an open community for anybody and everybody that exists in these communities. So they don't have to go through the same things that I went through, more than 10 years ago when entering the workforce.
Thank you so much for that incredible background, sharing and being candid about your journey. Definitely, I'm sure, helpful for those out there listening. When you look back on your journey, it really tells the evolution of your career and how you were able to come into this idea and conquer this idea, bringing your full self to work. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know you touched about it a little bit, but what that means to you and how you were able to use that to come into your career?
Yeah, I think it is, it's a tremendous impact, and something that it's funny, like now, and I just went through a lot of interviewing. When I left EA, I interviewed with a number of different organizations. And I think about, when I got to start my career, the questions I was asking when I was determining what would be a right fit for me. And today, and I think now, I really make it a large consensus of if I'm joining an organization or not, based off of how I perceive how open and how like much of my true self I can be at the organization, outside of just like, is it a good fit for the role itself? So that's definitely a major portion. But I ask about ERGs now. I ask about, what are you doing? Can I speak to somebody? And there are a lot of great organizations that I recently interviewed with that they will set you up with somebody from an ERG just to say like, hey, if you want to meet with them, this won't be part of the like your scoreboard of the interview process, but just for you as a candidate, if you want to learn more about what we have as an organization from an ERG setup, what's available. That's something that's become tremendously more important to me, and something that I'm really looking at when I'm joining organizations. So that's been kind of a big deal, something that's shifted over the years, and something that is kind of one of those things that is a requirement for me when I'm working at a specific organization these days.
So I know we're going to be talking about ERGs in just a minute, but before we go into that conversation, I want to bring up this topic because for me, it's been something very difficult to overcome. But bringing your full self to work means overcoming the uncomfortable everyday pleasantries that our coworkers and peers may not be privy to. So how do you interact with people who can't fully see sexuality or gender expression in their day-to-day conversations? Can you give us some examples, and I know you've already have, of your own personal experiences on how you dealt with these everyday conversations and how both sides can be better at approaching these informalities on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I can give from both points of view as somebody that's like, the object of maybe somebody who's making assumptions, or in the reverse, how I speak to different folk that like, maybe I've never met them before, or maybe it's my first time meeting them. I've really trained myself to use they, them pronouns if I don't have somebody explicitly giving their pronouns. I think that's a really big thing. And I've made mistakes. I've had to like kind of retrain my brain, because I think we all grew up in a world where you take a look at somebody and then you say they have masculine or they have feminine features. And then you basically try to clock them and you automatically assume they are a specific gender. And I think, now that there's a lot more awareness and a lot more conversation going on, I have trained myself to, even if somebody presents feminine or masculine or looks a certain way, like, do not make that assumption. If anything, it's just nice to label everybody with they, them until you have an explicit kind of understanding of what they have for their preferred pronouns. So I love the advancements in technologies and organizations that have actually made that a little bit easier for people to understand too. So big kudos to LinkedIn for finally kind of putting pronouns under an official section. Everybody was kind of like hot gluing it together after their last names for a while, just because they didn't have that section. But you have a lot of ways now to figure that out, and you can always ask, right? Like if you want to know, like I think kind of how we open the conversation today, just giving pronouns, even if nobody asks for it, I think creating that sort of normalization when we're talking about pronouns specifically. And then in terms of things like sexuality, one thing that I experience regularly, which I really do not like, is people automatically assume that I have a wife. You're at sales conferences, or you're at conferences in general, or you're having conversations with people. And if somebody sees you're married or you're wearing a wedding ring, I lost mine, by the way. I have no idea where it is. It's been gone for 3 months. So I need to find a replacement for that. But when people see a wedding ring and they just automatically start asking about your wife, or, they're like, they're trying to make this casual small talk. And I know we're going to be talking about B2B. That's really important for those of you that are sales folk representing companies, and you're really trying to make those human connections with potential clients, right? So certain things like that, I think, when in doubt, always, don't be afraid to ask. And then if you are on the other end of that, depending on how confident you are, this isn't for everybody. Some people, they just don't feel comfortable doing this. Correct people. And if you are somebody who is an ally of that person, and maybe they don't have the confidence to stand up for themselves, you can jump in as an ally and correct somebody else on their behalf if you're in a conversation and they're introduced the wrong way, or if they make the wrong assumption, and things like that. So I think it's just important to get everybody to that place where they're inherently asking those questions up front, not making assumptions. But until we're there, it doesn't hurt to call somebody out and just be like, hey, you're incorrect, or kind of pulling them aside and educating them about, how they can be better at figuring those things out, navigating those waters for sure.
Totally. I mean, I think the two largest learnings right there, don't be afraid to ask and don't assume. I can't tell you how many times I have played the narrative for far too long that I have a boyfriend until it just becomes, it just comes out and it's uncomfortable for everyone. So definitely important. And as we move into 2022, the conversations around inclusivity and diversity are, of course, more prevalent than ever. And when it comes to the queer community, marketers need to not only understand us, but connect with us. And this means both internally and externally. So that means the work to reach them and us must also come from within your own walls. So Jonathan, can you please talk about the importance of ERGs, what that stands for, and why you participate in them?
Yeah, ERGs, I think, are essential for organizations these days, as is kind of hiring somebody that specializes in diversity and inclusion, which you're seeing a lot more organizations creating specific roles for that. The reason I think we have a lot of these conversations and a lot of people focus on their actual marketing efforts, and then maybe you have creative kind of folk talking about, how to creatively represent the LGBTQ plus community. I always like to advocate for ERGs because throughout my career, they have been such an amazing resource, which I think many people may assume that it's this additional thing that organizations do for the comfort of their employees. It is that, and that is a tremendous benefit, creating those safe spaces for your employees, attracting top tier talent that is part of that community, and then having kind of those areas of people to do referrals and things like that. But I think it's also a great opportunity to act as a sounding board and to, it goes into the hiring too. You hire more queer artists, you're going to naturally have that ingrained into kind of the advertising, the creative, the content that your companies are producing. But also it's a great place that if you as a marketer or you as a creative lead are unsure, this is something I would always say is have people that authentically have experienced these things, tell these stories and create these stories. But not all organizations can do that. So if you're partnering with maybe an agency to help do that and stuff, or you're trying to design that yourself, ERGs are a fantastic resource to act as a sounding board, because if you are not part of those communities, you may be creating content that maybe you read a couple of online articles or maybe you replicated advertisements you saw in the past, but things constantly change. There's such a shift from one year to the next in terms of what people may understand, what's kind of commonplace knowledge, what is good and what is bad. Those things always kind of change and evolve over time. So using your ERGs to basically show them some things that maybe you're unsure about or you just want feedback against is a great way to just make sure that you're not putting content out in the world that negatively impacts the perception of your brand or comes off as just out of touch or just insensitive, things like that. Because this stuff is always changing and evolving. And the best way to keep on top of things is really having somebody that is part of that community giving you that source of feedback for what you're putting out into the world.
Totally. And when it comes to activation and creating impact, can you tell us about the work that you've done with ERGs and what that looks like exactly?
Yeah, so the past two organizations, so Ancestry and then Electronic Arts, I've directly joined the Pride boards just to contribute. And I think that's something that I like to do. It's something I like to foster, talking about earlier in the conversation. I have that thing ingrained in my head where I'm I don't want anybody to go through what I went through when I was first entering the workforce. And I really want to sanction that and make sure there are those spaces for individuals and we're really doing things right from an organizational perspective. I have been part of a lot of education in both of those organizations. I think that's really important. And one thing I want to say too is just I think everybody to this point, even if you're, living in a major city, you grew up around the gay community, I think everybody is pretty comfortable with the gay white male at this point. And I think a lot of things that I've helped with these organizations is talking about the broader spectrum of what creates our community, because there's a lot more than gay, right? There's a lot more things that are just being defined in the past few years. Maybe they didn't have a word for what people were experiencing and what they identified as. And I think being part of these ERGs, I really try to bring the focus and support, especially the trans community, the asexual community, these communities that are still experiencing really terrible hardships, both in the working environment and then out in the real world, or are underrepresented, or people just don't think about them or don't take them seriously. A lot of the work, I think, that sticks with me from these organizations has to do with like the Trans Day of Remembrance and Trans Day of Visibility, and just creating education for internal folk about, how they could learn more, and just educating them and creating resources and bringing in guest speakers that represent those communities and are relating their own trials and tribulations, the products that we're putting out into the world, to help hopefully change some minds internally within these organizations that may not be on board, or educate folk that just didn't know about these communities and these individuals and kind of what they were going through. So I think that's kind of where my mind goes when I think about some of the impacts I've hopefully left about some of these organizations and the support I've provided. And then we have some great stories of just like creating events. Ancestry, there was a really amazing event where we had somebody that we brought in to do a sort of mini TED Talk within the organization. And this individual talked about how he was able to use Ancestry's archives and all of the records to do research on his like great-great-great-grandfather, and piece together that he was most likely gay, based off of kind of some of the records that he found pertaining to living situations and roommates, and like who he left kind of a lot of his possessions to when he passed away and things like that. And it was amazing to hear this queer gentleman kind of discover that, this relative of his that he had never met, wouldn't be able to meet, was part of the community through the product that, of an organization that we all represented. It was just such a nice moment. And to bring allies into that conversation and to kind of use that as a sounding board to say, hey, there are certain features and capabilities that maybe we should be implementing into things like Family Tree Builder to better represent the larger community at hand, based off of this one gentleman's story, because he's able to find this out, but maybe he's not able to accurately represent, his great-great-great-grandfather on the family tree because of limitations and capabilities in the actual platform itself. So that kind of sticks out to me. That was like a really great, rewarding moment during my time there.
That's incredible. Wow, that's incredible. So I know we talked a lot about, hiring best practices, having internal consultants from the walls inside, a little bit about, campaign work and product. But when it comes to these efforts, I think it can almost be impossible to affect actual change if the stakeholders you need to support you are not on board. So how do you approach this scenario and get leverage from upper management to make this happen?
Yeah, I think that falls into a lot of you executive leaders out there. Be an advocate, especially if you are part of the community. I know being involved in some of these things that people may consider extracurricular, it's not necessarily like let's say like quote unquote your day-to-day, but you are the folk that can actually speak to CEOs and some of those executives that are out of reach in certain cases for some of the people that are on the ground floor that really don't have that availability or that ability to communicate to these folk directly. I think there are a lot of great examples, outside of marketing tactics, how negative sentiment on companies kind of get out into the world and how they do impact sales numbers. Like I'm seeing it a lot in the gaming industry right now, right? I won't mention names, but I think everybody knows kind of some of the things that are going on. If you are doing things that maybe are a little unsavory or a lot unsavory, or just, are adamantly not supporting these communities, no matter how great your marketing tactics are, no matter how much money you're donating to organizations, if some of the folk on the top level are really going against those views, I think the public will know. We are in an age of information sharing, and public sentiment gets around, and it really does impact sales and things like that. I think that there is a tremendous responsibility for organizations to just kind of be aware of what they are supporting, what they should be supporting, and how it's not just not something they should only look at when things are are in a bad place. That should be something that's just kind of on the ground floor, company support in general. And something that I think some of the companies out there could be doing a better job of, but it's an ongoing battle. It's an ongoing effort for sure.
Totally. I think we can all do a better job, but I mean, we've all seen brands who have been notorious for slapping a pride flag on their logo for the month of June, which is Pride Month, without any clear connection to the communities they claim to support. So I'm going to ask you, what are the do's and don'ts of marketing to LGBTQ plus audiences?
Yeah, it's a 365-day-a-year effort. It is not, only in the month of June. People will notice that too. And I think one of the funniest things, like I noticed personally, is like July 1st when brands switch their rainbow pride logo back, because it usually shows that like on a lot of different social media platforms. And it's just like the funniest thing. It's like almost like maybe it was automated. They're like just set the end date to that. So not that specifically. It's okay if you. But the point I'm trying to make there is make sure that you are kind of doing things all throughout the year, major events throughout the year, supporting your communities, kind of doing things that aren't just during the month of June. And really raising awareness for some of those lesser known communities as part of the LGBTQ plus kind of ecosystem in the sphere, outside of, just participating in the Pride Parade, because that is, to be honest, like that is a little bit of the lowest common denominator. And I think what people really are looking for as part of the community when they're supporting brands and things like that is what are you contributing to all throughout the year? What organizations are you as an organization contributing to? What programs do you have in place both inside your organization and then externally that are benefiting the community? What is your public stance when things happen internally, or something happens where somebody is not supportive of the community or is adamantly against it? Like, as an organization, what is your stance? What is your general stance? And I think like Electronic Arts was a great kind of example of an organization that was just really outwardly communicative. I would say internally and externally communicative about what they're doing to support the community. And we had some great executive leadership. Laura Miele was absolutely fantastic. And one of those people that you would see join Pride weekly, we have weekly Pride chats as part of our ERG. She would come in, she would participate, she would listen. Sometimes she would be vulnerable. It wasn't just during June, and people, word of mouth is a thing. Like I talk to people about that all the time about, executive leadership and what the brand represents, during my time at the organization. And then when I leave, in conversations like this. So I think it's just one of those things where you create that kind of dedicated effort. Make sure that you are supporting these things. And, the last chat, I was able to catch the last few minutes of that intersectionality, right? Like, how are these different groups of underrepresented people outside of the LGBTQ plus community, but then also may fall in multiple categories? How are all of these groups working together? How are you as an organization supporting all of these different groups? And then really creating a space where, it feels like you're authentically supporting that outside of, rainbow overlay on top of your logo. And there have been similar things with other brands where it's like the whole black box thing that was done during the BLM protests, where it's just like, what did you do as an organization? Like you changed your picture for a couple of days, which actually added to the problem. But what did you do outside of that? Did you educate your employees internally? Did you create spaces to really talk to employees internally that were going through a rough time and saying, like, how are you feeling? Because I think what people don't realize is like all of these things impact, from a marketing, bring it back to marketing, the productivity of your teams, how they feel comfortable and happy. Like, people are always going through tough times and things happen in the world. How are you addressing that as an organization? How are you talking to your employees and saying, yes, we understand this terrible thing happened. We are here for you. We are giving you time off to like kind of digest that. We are creating these spaces for you to talk about it. We are deploying benefits for you to talk to somebody if you need to. So I think there's so much of that sits outside of just like what ads you're putting out in the space that will impact the quality of life of your employees, the organic and authentic stories that you're telling. And then just over time, you're doing good. it will actually benefit you as like an organization as well from a sales perspective. But the authenticity and finding people that truly care about those issues is where it starts. And leadership, hiring that leadership that really encourages that from the top down is so important as well.
Totally. I mean, we're speaking a lot about impact. And I know on our call, we discussed the importance of the actual product in this conversation. You spoke about how, and with your time at EA, you spoke about how the product encompasses the larger community and how that itself is not actually advertising, but it was the brand's ability to provide an experience for their consumers to be themselves in their own version. So can you elaborate on this initiative and tell us more about how you were able to keep the queer community in mind when it came to the actual external facing product?
Yeah, I love it. I'm a gamer nerd, so this is a very passionate topic of mine, and something that I'm really happy to see. We're not 100% there that as a gaming industry as a whole, but we're getting there, which is really great to see. Things like, I always give this example. When I first, I would say early on, I got into gaming. I think all of you that are familiar with the original Pokemon series for the Game Boy, you would go, as soon as you started the game, the first question that was asked to you by Professor Oak, which was kind of funny at the time, was like, I know you on a personal level. Why are you asking me this question? Are you a boy or are you a girl? This was a question, like one of the first questions you're asked in this game, and it would designate the appearance of your character and like kind of your pronouns throughout the game and things like that. But what we're seeing today is a lot of these gaming developers removing that restriction. And I think for a long time we saw with character creators, we have a lot of games that come out now where you create your own character. You are living your own experience in the game. I think a lot of people play game as an escapism kind of mechanism. You want to create this character that can be, or maybe isn't, a representation of you. But when you want it to be a representation of your true self, sometimes there are a bending of masculine and feminine traits and things that you don't want to be restricted on. So traditional gaming, are you a boy or a girl? If you're a boy, you get locked into certain hairstyles, you get locked into certain fashions, you get all this stuff is kind of excluded when you pick one of those two things. And what you're seeing now, and some things that EA has done a great job of with series like The Sims, I always use that. That's a great example of something where you can define and change and just be whatever you want in that world, is that those barriers are being broken down. And if you want a mustache and you want a ponytail, you can do that because that's how you express yourself. If you want to wear a skirt and you want to have big muscles, like you can do that because we shouldn't be putting restrictions on the characters people want to create. And I just love that now there isn't a limitation based off of that question at the beginning of the game. Are you a boy or girl? That's not even being asked anymore. It's just like create your character. And that's how it should be. You have all those resources available. You can do whatever you want. And, that's what people want. And I think, we're seeing more and more of that. And then in terms of romantic relationships, we're not quite there. Some of the games are a little like restrictive still in terms of who you can romance. But I look at games like Mass Effect. I look at games like Dragon Age. You're starting to have more queer relationship options when there are kind of areas where you could romance specific characters. When you look in games, I would say 5-10 years ago, a lot of them were very restrictive. Like, again, are you a boy or are you a girl? You're a boy, you can only romance the female characters. You're a girl, you can only romance the male characters. And now we're seeing that again being broken down, and you can romance not necessarily everybody yet, but like, they create a certain subset of characters that you can do same gendered relationships. And then it gets even more complex when you have characters coming out now in these games that are non-binary, which is amazing because it's still things that like I find people still don't quite fully understand when it comes to talking about gender. And just seeing the constant evolution of that, I have a lot of hope in the future. I think things will continue to evolve and change, but it's just been so refreshing as a gamer to have those restrictions being removed, in a lot of the games I'm playing today. So that's always great.
I love this conversation of brands doing it right. And I know on our call, we talked about Netflix and Asana. Can you tell us about those two brands and how you like what they're doing with their marketing efforts?
Yeah, so I first want to say I know there's some craziness going on with Netflix right now, and then the whole David Chappelle fiasco. It's not okay what he said, and I think there should be further conversations and kind of things that they do as a brand to address that and potentially remove that from the platform. I don't agree with any of the sort of hate speech that's put out there. But from a content perspective, Queens Who Watch. So they do a really great series with two well-known drag queens in the community. It's content that's sponsored by Netflix of two drag queens watching kind of movies and shows that are available on Netflix. And I think it's such a great series that they put up on YouTube that promotes the product, but it's also a show that I want to watch, even if I'm not, how do I put it? It doesn't feel like an advertisement, right? Like it's pure content that I think is hilarious. I think it's great. And I really enjoy watching, whether or not Netflix had anything to do with it or not. But sometimes they're reviewing shows, and I'll go back and I'll watch some of those shows on Netflix. So it definitely does do its job. I think finding those nice mediums of putting out content into the world and embracing the community and partnering with folk that are part of the community to create great content that doesn't feel forced, or it doesn't feel, necessarily specifically only one community will enjoy it. I think that's a great move that they made on their part. And then Asana, things like Asana. So a lot of you tech companies out there, Slack is another great example. Doing simple features within the platform itself. You may not like think of Slack and think of like, how are you giving back to the LGBT community from like Slack? But there are little things that you can do when you're creating user profiles, incorporating pronouns into the actual platform. So people don't have to kind of hodgepodge it together using kind of like what we experienced with LinkedIn a while ago before they actually put a pronoun feature in there. So little kind of tweaks to your tech, and that's my thing. It's ad tech and marketing tech. Your tech platforms can make all the difference. Those little subtle changes that maybe take, a day or two to kind of implement. I'm probably underrepresenting the amount of time it takes to make those changes, but those simple changes actually could have a greater impact than you actually think. And it's not a massive feature overhaul. It's just a simple thing where you can add pronouns. So being really thinking about that, and then talking again, go back to your ERGs, go back to your career employees and ask them, like, what is some of the things in the product that you're using every day? Like, how could we make this a little bit more inclusive? And how could we make this more friendly to the larger communities? Maybe it's things that we're not thinking about, and they'll have that perspective. So definitely talk to your people for sure.
We have a ton of examples that we discussed today and tips surrounding how companies are approaching their B2C efforts from the inside out. But what about the B2B marketing approach? At the beginning of our session, you spoke about your time in sales, and there seems to be a lack of queer sales representatives, especially within tech companies. They tend to follow a very specific archetype. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about how B2B efforts are driven and how sales teams can better connect with their business leads and clients by simply just improving their diversity.
Oh, I love this so much because I can recall many times in my career where I've had a salesperson reach out, or I've gone out to dinner with somebody from the sales team, and they struggle to talk to me when they find out I'm a gay nerd. When you run out of the topics of like football and, what are you and the wife doing? I've gotten that a lot too. Those are some of the examples I've got where somebody just assumes. It throws them for a loop, and sometimes it makes those kind of interactions a little awkward. And I've seen so many non-diverse sales teams. I think it's kind of a running gag in a lot of the tech sales communities of just like the specific archetype that typically is hired for those roles. But one thing that organizations should be very aware of, it's this tidal wave effect of now that, as I'll say in the US, many parts of the world are more accepting to the communities, and you're getting top tier talent working their way through organizations. We're not quite there yet, but you're seeing it more and more where people at the helm of these companies and, VP level and above are queer or are person of color or somebody in these subset communities. You need to start, thinking about how are your sales teams representing and kind of understanding some of the people that they're talking to from a sales perspective, because a lot of times there's a lot of diversity in that realm. And when you're unprepared to kind of have those conversations, B2B is at its core a very human kind of interaction, because you're reaching out to people within an organization. How are you better preparing your current sales team? And then how are you staffing them up to better accommodate those different types of interactions they'll be having with people that represent these companies and these organizations.
100%. Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
I do have, and if I can ask Jonathan one last thing.
Go for it.
All right, I would love to end on this question, because when we talk about the next generation of marketing leaders, I of course want to talk about the rising generation of queer leaders and how they can succeed in this new era. So Jonathan, what advice do you have for all of us?
Oh yeah, make time. So I know our day-to-days can be jam-packed full of Zoom meetings and things that pertain to the actual driving of the business from a numbers perspective. But those of you that are listening to this and you are in leadership positions, please dedicate that time to participating in ERGs, for sponsoring an ERG, for advocating on your hiring team to implement best practices that diversify your staff and make your current staff more comfortable. It can be additional work. It's an additional unpaid work, but it is so rewarding. And then the other thing I will say is recognize and celebrate your employees that are actively taking the time to participate in these functions within the organization. It's not something that they are directly paid for. It is something they are putting additional time into. Start giving them more leverage, start giving them more praise. Doesn't hurt to incorporate into the bonus allotment either, people that are really helping the organizations in these ways. Just put yourself out there and really start celebrating those that are adding those additional time and efforts to making the organization a better, more diverse place.
I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you so much for your time and, just educating all of us and giving us so much value. And I'm so excited to see what you do at SiriusXM. Can't wait for you to come back on the stage and talk about what you're doing there. So thank you again, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you for having me. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yes, thank you both for ending things on such a high note. Jonathan, extra thank you for bringing Meg Stalter to a BI Livecast. That was a highlight for me as well. So
I had some private messages saying thank you for showing that video. I loved it.
Okay, for sure. Awesome. Well, everyone, that is a wrap on today's Marketing to the LGBTQ+ livecast. Thank you for tuning in. If you missed anything or would like to review a session, check out our Brand Innovators YouTube page, where an archive link will be live later this week. And also, please tune in tomorrow for our next live cast, looking ahead, retail predictions in 2022. We have a jam-packed lineup for that one, including the CMOs of 7-Eleven, Walgreens, Pearl Vision, and Underground Cellar. You can go to brand/innovators.com for more details. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day.